thank you to all of you for being here. I think this would have been more suited just as a roundtable discussion, so do regard it as that. Do not hesitate to ask a question or, more importantly, a comment immediately after a speaker has spoken. You needn't wait till the end, because I really would prefer that, given the small number of us around, that we are all passionate about this. I'll just say a few opening sentences, really, not even remarks, and then hand the floor over to the panelists. Look, both yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and in many other events on climate change, there is a lot of deliberation. I think the awareness about the need to tackle climate change, the awareness about the need for countries to head towards zero emission, the awareness about the needs to look at future generation is definitely far, far more today than it was before. But the dichotomy in this discussion often does not get addressed fully. And that dichotomy is probably best captured by the word development, which is in the title of this session. Now, if you look at any country, especially the least developed countries or the developing countries, each of these countries has an aspiration to develop, and rightly so. I mean, you pick any country's national development plans, and there will be a plan for becoming either, to whatever be the next status, and that's growth. That's the epitome of what politics, economics, and development totally together combine. But for that growth and development to take place, you also need to ensure not just energy security to every single person, but also energy affordability. Because there is simply no point in saying that the remotest village in Nepal or the remotest village in India or anywhere else, you've provided an electric connection where the power probably comes for half an hour in 24 hours, and we all call it electrified. But really, no, that's not energy security. Secondly, even if you were to ensure that, yes, energy is there all the time, but the cost of that energy is so high that it is not affordable. Now, I will just give you one statistics, and perhaps then let the panelists weave their way through this issue of development, sharing country experiences also. Is that, just probably I'm more aware of it, so I'm quoting it. Take the example of India. The per capita power consumption is about 1200 kilowatts. And you look at most developed countries, the average is about 10,000. You've got the extreme high, the United States, but the European Union is about 6,000, 7,000. India also has an avowed goal of becoming a developed country, as they say in Hindi, Viksit Bharat at 2047. And if you're going to see that power consumption that you would require in manufacturing, services, data centers, you name it, and you want all that power to be green, it's not going to be green. It definitely is not going to be green. So here is this crux of trying to develop a kind of framework, not just in terms of policies, but perhaps also in terms of mindsets that could merge the most essential components of climate change and the most necessary components of development. With those words, let me start by giving the floor to Deepak ji, who's on my right. Well, the only interaction I have is he's the former minister for water resources in Nepal, but as he told me, that was decades ago. He doesn't look that old. His wealth of experience and his views, genuinely, that I have only read about, but I know, are definitely an important person for us to lead the discussion. Deepak ji.
Thank you. Let me, from what I've heard this morning, I couldn't be here yesterday because I was coming from another part of Nepal, where I'm in the middle right now of a massive energy transition study across Nepal. We finished the household part. It's in our website. We're in the middle of energy stress and transition in industries in Nepal right now, and we'll be doing transport after that. So after this, I have to leave immediately for Nepalganj also, so I'm in a bad shape. But from what I heard this morning, there were some very interesting questions, and so let me address that. As a cultural theorist, it's a new social science, I'm in the business of what we call addressing wicked problems, not tame domesticated problems, which are easy. Wicked problems are problems where we cannot even agree on what the problem is. Climate change is one of them. Water, energy are others. That's what I deal with. Now, wicked problems need what we call uncomfortable knowledge, not comfortable knowledge. Okay? And with that uncomfortable knowledge, we hope to come to what we call clumsy solutions. We are trained, unfortunately, in most of our academic lives to look for neat solutions. Problem in this age of uncertainty is that neat solutions are too rigid and they will collapse at the first hit of uncertainty. The first thing that comes, and then the neat solution is out of the window. So we have to go for this very wicked problems, uncomfortable knowledge, clumsy solutions. So let me introduce a dose of uncomfortable knowledge here. Let me start by saying that we are right now we are entering the age of Trump, and the first sign of that was the total failure of COP29 in Azerbaijan. It's also against this backdrop is the massive U.S. debt and the rise of BRICS, which means that America, which had what America had been doing for the last 70, my lifetime, after Second World War, of printing currency and exporting inflation abroad, it can no longer do. Which means it cannot easily solve that $36 trillion debt, rising at the level of $1 trillion every 100 years, 100 days. Sorry. Now, which is why at COP29, the expectation that the industrialized countries would come up with climate finance, well, we saw that what was promised in 2015 never came. They promised it in 2022, it never came. So to expect that in this age of Trump and US debt and everything else, to expect that climate financing will come so easily, I think the global south has to wake up. We have to do things on our own anyway, fund or no fund from abroad. That's the first uncomfortable kind of truth. The second is, we are seeing a massive amount of what we call this data politics. Oh, America is a big emitter, China is an emitter, India is an emitter, and all that. Now, you take that data and, do it on a per capita basis, and China and India just disappear from the map. On top of it, if you take cumulative emissions since 1850, which is the people who have polluted the atmosphere since then, the chance of India and China coming anywhere close is even too remote. So this is where the data politics is. Who is going to be paying for the cleanup? And there's no easy answer. It is a very, very wicked problem, and even the definition of the problem is not really clear. I am arguing that we, in countries like Nepal, should be worried about climate change. It's real, but the real climate change problems are in two areas, not in the energy sector. It's in, first, the rise in temperature, which means it's doing funny things to both the atmosphere, the soil moisture, more forest fires, disease vectors moving to areas, dengue in Kathmandu, we never had even malaria mosquitoes here. Things like that are happening. Okay. Very little studies there, very little resources to help us understand what's going on. So that's happening. The second thing is climate change problem for Nepal, and I would say globally, which COP27's major success was to admit that climate change problem was created by the energy sector, but the impact to society is exclusively through the water sector. Too much water, too little water, water in the wrong place, wrong time, you name it, okay? There's too much energy in the atmosphere, it contains more moisture. When it meets a cold front, the meeting of a cold front and a warm front is violent, causing more flood disasters, more droughts, and so on. There's little we can do about it, especially in a country like Nepal. We should be worried about mitigation, not for climate change reasons. Our emissions anyway, they are rising very fast, but still minuscule. we should do mitigation for purely economic security reasons. It's no sense getting more, addicted to fossil fuels. But unfortunately, as co-chair of Climate Action South Asia, Sanjay is here, Abid was my co-chair, he's not here in this room, Abid Suleri. One of the good things we did in Nepal was we did a purely civil society assessment of the state of climate action in Nepal, 2018. Okay? And what that showed, if I were to summarize, and the report is available, with the Cancer website, you can look at it, is that and we talked a lot about climate policy this morning, and every time I hear the word policy, I go berserk. Problem is policy, there is stated de jure policy and there is de facto unstated policy everywhere. Okay. So what it shows is Nepal's climate policies are so damn good, you can give Nepal a Nobel Prize in climate policy, hands down, no questions asked. You look at climate action in Nepal, our fossil fuel reduction is rising at a speed and scale that is unheard of. Which means that the government of Nepal really should be locked in a dungeon and whipped every day. There is the schizophrenia between climate policy and real climate action. So what I am arguing now is that, there's little we can do about with mitigation and things like that. Adaptation, we don't even know what is the extreme we have to adapt to. So what are we talking about? Okay, so what we should do really is, much of our problem today is from what we call maldevelopment. Kubikas versus subikas, as we say it here. Okay. And climate problems, climate issues are going to make kubikas, maldevelopment, is going to make it even worse. Now, maldevelopment is something we can reverse. Now, we're talking about development, and that's a big issue. I'm talking about rethinking development. Absolute necessity to rethink what is development. Now, bad development, if we don't reverse the impact of bad developments that we have done, our climate mess is going to be even worse. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second, we have, this whole thing about carbon trading. I'm a big critic of that. The reason for that is it's meaningless when it comes to mitigation, but that's not my real concern. My real concern is it's morally repugnant. It is like we live in a courtyard, let's say. I'm a rich guy, and what I do is I dump my waste in front of your house or your flat and say that, I have the money, I'll pay you, you clean it up. Is it all right? Isn't it morally repugnant? That is the issue. Now, to expect a market since 1850 that caused the problem to solve the problem is expecting too much. It needs strong non-market measures, governments, local communities, activist groups, to really be active to get that change, But to expect that markets will do the necessary thing is a pipe dream. I'm closing with two more points. We talk about hydropower, Nepal's hydropower. Yeah, it's not much. Hydropower is nothing in Nepal. It's only 40,000 megawatts of, whatever is possible development. And the wrong philosophy here is that we can export all that and become rich. Listen, India has got 4 lakh megawatts of installed capacity. China has 20 lakhs. Even if we develop all our hydropower, the Nepali expression is, a grain of mustard in an elephant's mouth. It's no point. The issue is something else. The issue is water storage. Okay. And in climate change conditions, how do we do more water storage? If that generates some extra hydropower, well and good. But with the fact that solar is getting cheaper, and India's TERI has estimated that by 2030, solar is already cheaper than hydropower currently. 5.1, I'm talking global figures, 5.1 cents versus 4.9. TERI has estimated that solar is going to be 2.5 by 2030. Mm-hmm. Now, this is a tremendous driver. There's nothing you can do against such a driver. Okay, but sun only shines for 6 hours a day. What are we going to do? Which means it needs massive batteries. Ordinary batteries are not going to help. Even Mr. Musk with his Tesla batteries are not going to help. What we need is development of hydropower, complete rethinking of hydropower development, away from your run-of-river projects to storage projects, but even beyond storage projects to pump storage hydro. And our recent study has shown that it's extremely valuable if we marry solar power with pump storage hydro. Okay, so this is what we have to do. This means completely rethinking the entire hydro structure. But we're talking about a country, Nepal, where last 16 years the bill in Parliament to restructure the Electricity Act has not passed. 16 years, and this parliaments since 2008 have failed to even pass an electricity act that needs to restructure our electricity, organizations. Okay. There's also a failure to build storage projects in the last 34 years. Panchayat at least built one Kulekhani way back, but in 34 years since then, we haven't built any. And I'll close by saying that, what the major battle ahead, we talked about energy policy, industrialization, green this and green that being used, but ultimately it's going to be the new environmental battle is going to be around the issue of footprints, water and energy footprints. How do we get the same level of services, goods and services, by reducing our footprint? I'll give you only one example. There are tons of examples. What we call broiler chicken in Nepal, the one that's battery fed and this thing, is every kilo of that chicken has 4,000 liters of water embedded in it, and energy I don't even want to get into is pretty high, because you are feeding it corn, which humans could consume directly without feeding the chicken and then eating the chicken. But a local, what is called a free-ranging chicken, we call it local chicken versus broiler chicken, a local chicken's water footprint is only 1,500, 3 times lower. Okay, so which means, and this is in the shirt you wear, the shoes you wear, the coffee you drink, and everything. The battle is now going to be how do we reduce our footprints, energy footprint, carbon, water footprint, and try to get the same goods and services. And this is where the water, energy, food nexus comes in. You cannot talk water without talking energy. You cannot talk energy without talking food. And current policy, so-called policy measures, which I heard a lot this morning, are nowhere near addressing it. If you address only energy policy or industrial policy or something, you're going to go nowhere. And I think Paras was mentioning this morning that we have all kinds of policies and none of them talk to each other. And why? I'll give you a very simple example. As my experience as a minister long ago, things are much worse now, was that these policies are only made for donors. External and international donors. Oh, do you have an energy policy? Oh, yes, we have this wonderful policy. Do you have an agriculture policy? Yeah, you have a tomato policy, a carrot policy, you have every policy, okay? And these are made for donor projects. They have absolutely no relevance when it comes to de facto policy of how governments actually use their power. They have no relevance to how markets actually use their power. And they have absolutely no relevance to how civic movements, which are a dying breed, by the way. Civic movements were powerful in the 90s and 80s and 90s. In the 21st century, civic movements, not just in Nepal, India, but also globally, are practically withered away and died. There's a need to revive all that. And that is moral power, and even there, you are not getting much. So I close by saying that, we need to start quickly rethinking development, and we also need to be rethinking governance. It's not just to talk about democracy anymore. Does democracy deliver? Is it accountable? Does it respond? Or are we only worried about voting and the whole voting mechanism captured by a few aggregates of political parties? So there's a serious crisis ahead of us, and this is where the problem is. Thank you. I'll end with that.
Thank you, sir.
Deepakji, thank you so much. We were outside chatting a bit about time for this session, and we decided we would have about 5-6 minutes as an introductory thing. And Deepakji commented that even 100 minutes actually could be less. But really, I marvel at, and I think I'm as much to blame for as long as I've been looking at climate issues. I've been, I think, looking at a wicked problem, but trying to find a very neat solution. And maybe my opening remarks were there too. So thank you very much for putting us on this chart of discussion. Biraj Singh Thapaji, you were introduced to me in your absence as the green hydrogen man. So the floor is over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'd like to thank the organizers and the team that made this possible and invited me to this wonderful discussions. And I also thank former Minister Gemaliji for opening up such a broad session. So I'd like to condense it a little bit and bring it towards the topic that's tapping clean energy for development. So that's a clean energy is the issue, and that's a buzzword not only in our part, it's a global. It has become a global politics, and it is being kind of extremely politicized in the sake for the climate change and sustainability of the humanity in itself. So that's a very big thing. So I think when we talk about and when bring that clean energy perspective in South Asia, we have a very enriched history, long cultural, deep rooted on sustainability and how we use our resources and to create the sustainable life and beyond. So that's where we are deeply rooted at the first place, and that's where we should start our beginning on the clean energy. In meanwhile, at the moment, things were changed in lots last couple of centuries, and things have distorted from where the South Asia had its background on sustainability and all these clean aspects. Now, the South Asia as a region, we have a common challenges. I think we have a shared resources and also joint responsibilities to create the opportunities together. So in that perspective, we need energy. Energy is the background, it's a foundation, it's a need for any kind of prosperity in modern world. But then things happen in such a way that almost 80% of energy that comes in South Asia is from fossil fuels. So the first question is there a need to mitigate or come out from the fossil fuels? Yes. And all these COPs and climate things and scientific evidence have already established it's a human born problem. And it's due to the extensive use of fossil fuels that we have come to this verge where this 80% of fossil fuel has to be replaced in one or another way in the whole South Asia region. So despite of political boundaries, despite of the level of economies, despite of so many differences that exist within the countries in South Asia, we have a common challenge, how to come out of the fossil fuels together. That is not possible. I think that's not possible when each country are working together, because we have shared resources, the natural resources that is needed to come out of this fossil fuel is shared. Then the second question is, does South Asia have enough resources to replace fossil fuels? There has been so many research and findings which shows that South Asia has enough renewable energy, solar, wind, hydro, geothermal and other sources of renewable energy to replace the fossil fuels it's being consumed. So it's not the question of if we have or don't have the alternatives. We do have. But then the question, the most important question is how to bring that renewable energy which we have, which we share among the countries to replace the fossils, which actually we don't have, which we actually import. Almost 30% of fossils that is consumed in South Asia, more than that, is getting imported. And that's where India have taken the lead, where they call energy independence by 2047, where India does not want to import a single penny fossil fuels from abroad. And that is something that has to be regionalized, if not globalized. If the whole South Asia commits together to share the resources, to create the opportunities where the energy independence becomes a regional political priority, and that energy independence will be green, then the question is how to tap the renewables which we have and how to replace the fossils which has been committing this climate change. And the fossils have two dimensions, and the most important part of that fossils are its quality, that gives a very high quality of energy which renewables cannot give. It has a flexibility. The fossils can be used on any field that we can imagine, and the fossils has reliability. If you push any diesel generator, it works. Like my minister said, former minister said, solar, it doesn't work always. Solar cannot fly the airplanes. Wind does not rotate always. Wind turbines cannot propel the ships that goes in the marines. So we have renewables, but how to bring that renewables in the sector which is called as hard to abate. So I think that's the main key question. So this is the thing where the South Asian region has to collaborate. We need to use the energy which we have. For example, Nepal and Bhutan have so much of water and biodiversity resources. Bangladesh and India have solar and wind that's being it's there. So how to use that? So I think that should be the question. So my argument here is, does our political consensus comes to the point where we agree South Asia to be taken as one unique region where we have common challenges, where we have shared opportunities and resources to come out of the fossils and help each other to decarbonize, and the whole South Asian region together to be energy independent and 100% renewables. So that's my point. So maybe I open with these remarks, and maybe I would like to put more comments how to achieve it together in further.
Thank you, Thapaji. Perhaps I could then maybe just take a minute to combine something that was an important thrust of the conclusion that Deepakji made and you said. This whole thing about promoting hybrid systems, because, we've for too long been looking at them rather individually. But the need to promote hybrid systems, which in a way would combine solar and wind, especially storage, and then take it. But the second point that you also said, I think is extremely important, about there being abundance of renewable energy in this region. The only point I want to add for thought, if anyone else wants to expand later in it, is that perhaps we have not, in a macro level, that's absolutely true. But what we really also need to do is a little more of localized resource mapping as to determine which areas has more solar, more wind, and how that interchange could take place. But thank you. Thank you for those remarks. And I have now the pleasure of giving the floor to an old friend. He's not old in age, but Dr. Muazzam and the organization that he's with, the Center for Policy Dialogue, and many of us, but me in particular, have had a long and a wonderful relationship. So over to you, G.
Thank you, Shishiji. At first, I would like to thank Swati for inviting me to this conference, which is a great opportunity to meet with friends as well as to share our thoughts with other regional fellows. I try to find out a regional angle of clean energy or the renewable energy perspective. But in this context, what just Birar Singh mentioned, I also echo with him, is that there is a difference in terms of the terminology, how it is being used in case of decarbonization in these countries. I think somewhere it is mentioned clean energy, somewhere it is mentioned green, somewhere it is mentioned renewable, somewhere it is mentioned sustainable, and each of it has different connotation. And most importantly, these are not a problem of academic jargons or academic differences. Rather, this is the problem of different political perspective. So that is a major problem of using different terminologies for a decarbonization initiative and in which directions the South Asian countries will go. That is very, very important to look at. For Bangladesh, I think though the earlier army government regime has formulated the policy and used the term clean energy, unfortunately within that clean energy they targeted to reach 40% of the so-called clean, of which only 8% is renewable, and the rest is non-renewable. What is that? Carbon capture technologies, ammonia, hydrogen, coal. So these, and nuclear, and also import from India. So these are some way deviate the overall broader country perspective of decarbonization in country like Bangladesh. I think the same problem may happen in other countries as well. At the same time, it is also true that each of the South Asian countries are largely guided by their comparative advantages in terms of the resources. Some of the South Asian countries have abundance in fossil fuel, and some have an abundance on renewables like hydro, and some are dependent on imported energy. And these kinds of comparative advantages and aberrances have largely influenced their domestic as well as their international policies. So that we have to take into cognizance that to what extent the bilateral policy or individual country-specific policies could align with other South Asian countries' perspective and policies, and how that could be aligned with and come out with the regional perspective. That's not so easy. So I think that's very, very important to take into cognizance. Even countries, the earlier session I raised hand, but I didn't get chance to ask this question, is that even I'm sure that within the countries, their green transformation or the renewable energy related or the clean energy related policies also heavily get pressured by the fossil fuel lobby. So there has to have a compromise within at the domestic level to set the targets to align with other domestic players, particularly non-renewables within the overall transformation or the transition strategies. And the same is true for Bangladesh as well. And as I just said, given you the example that their civil society raised this issue in Bangladesh, should not replace the term renewable by clean, but they replace it, and they have used this clean energy to justify coal, ammonia, hydrogen in the national policy. So that is some way where under this new interim government has agreed, and they are now will go for a revision of the integrated energy and power system master plan. But even then, I found that South Asian countries made good progress. And there are good lessons to learn from for Bangladesh particularly, who is a laggard in terms of the renewable energy initiatives. I found that India has already raised its target from 190 gigawatt. It set its target to 500 gigawatt by 2030. Pakistan also set its targets from 41% to 60% by 2030. Sri Lanka also set its targets from 37% to 27 by 2030. It reached to 70%. So all have a very ambitious target to increase their renewable energy targets. Unfortunately, Bangladesh at this moment has a very low renewable energy base, 4.5%, and it'd like to reach it to 40% by 2040. So not so easy, but there are things like that. These kinds of targeting are there. So we like to learn how South Asian countries, particularly India, particularly Pakistan and Sri Lanka, are actually facilitating and promoting their renewable energy initiatives within their territory. But at the same time, it is also true that South Asian countries also promoting the coal-based, accelerating coal as well. So that is another aspect of it. So that also indicates that though there is a so-called green transformation or the energy transformation happening, but not necessarily an energy transition happening. So we are lag in terms of the transition point of view. So there may have a green, but at the same time, the gray industrialization is also ongoing. So that is a big part of it. For Bangladesh, is a major problem here is on financing. And it is basically because the most cases, as you know, Bangladesh is a highly land scarce country. So often investors as well as the financiers complain that the cost of land is so high that the projects found to be long gestation period to realize the investment. Even it is 10 to 12 years. So that is not feasible. That they consider to be very risky for them for investment on those projects. So in terms of the financing point of view, we need of much more support from multilateral development agencies in terms of the risk-bearing component, in terms of the insurance part. So those are not so much available. MDBs are there, and bilateral investors are also there, but unfortunately those are not so much favorable that the renewable energy investors could use. Rather, they still prefer to provide funding for fossil fuel-based power generation in the country. Another important point that I like to raise here is that Bangladesh receive support as well as cooperation, particularly with India, in terms of the trade, investment, and finance point of view. And there are different dimensions of it. In one hand, Bangladesh's, there is a regional bilateral agreed with India and Bangladesh, upon which Bangladesh receiving over 1,600 megawatt of electricity from India. So that is a good part of regional energy trade. And very recently, we are receiving electricity from Nepal as well. 40 megawatt of electricity we are receiving from Nepal. That is also a good part of it. And also Bangladesh also recently developed a pipeline with India for directly supporting diesel from India to Bangladesh. So those are different kinds of initiatives currently ongoing in terms of the energy trade. But the point here is that still most of these are fossil fuel based. So my point here is that if these kinds of fossil fuel based regional trade or investments promote, that actually indirectly affect the promotion of, adversely affect the promotion of renewable energy in a country like Bangladesh. It has a double-edged sword. Like if the regional grid developed and the regional fossil fuel based electricity comes from India or other countries, that actually make the fossil fuel based power generation more viable. And that also make the countries less interested to actually transit to renewables. On the other hand, if it comes to Bangladesh, Bangladesh also found less space for promoting its renewable base on its own. As just Viraj Singh saying that energy independence is a perspective of India, and same is true for other regional countries. Each country like to see their energy independence because it's a strategic thing, and everybody like to not to depend on energy at a larger extent to other countries. The experience that Europe is experiencing at this moment because of its over dependence on Russia, and that's why they didn't take much step regarding the political and the other issues there. So my point here is that regional countries should not actually promote fossil fuel based energy trade, investments or finance in the coming days. Rather, these kinds of trade, investment and finance should be phased out. That are much more expecting in the coming days. And at the same time, what we are also seeing is that sometimes the regional and Asian countries, sometimes the regional and the Asian countries are developing, are going for alliance building. Nowadays, energy-related alliance building is so popular, and it's happening at a very larger scale. Let me give you some name, like Asian Net Zero Community, which is led by Japan, and which is basically promoting fossil fuel as well as some of the new advanced technologies there. There is an Alliance for Global Biofuel Alliance, where India is also there, Bangladesh is also there, but that also actually promoting fossil fuel there. And there is also like Powering Part Alliance, Future Coal Global Alliance, LNG Alliance. So these kinds of alliance building are there, and sometimes these alliances are used for de facto creating pressure to the countries of ensuring the fossil fuel based supply or the linkages with those countries. So that is another kinds of a problem for small countries or developing countries like Bangladesh. So my final point here is that we are not in a state of European Union where Europe has already gone for a Green Deal within European countries, or we are not even close to ASEAN countries, where ASEAN countries have an energy pathways and energy target for five years till 2026, and they have their grid, they have their action plans for renewable energy promote. We are far behind that. So how could we start working on on a regional perspective. I think the best way from Bangladesh perspective is not to encourage fossil fuel for regional trade, regional investments, and regional financing point of views. That could be the start of it, and later on, I think the other countries. I have just in the morning we heard that how India is progressing their manufacturing base apart from China, so that could also facilitate some future investment options even in case of Bangladesh. So those kinds of things we may consider as a starter for a regional partnership within South Asia. Thank you.
Mozambique, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think the important thing that your intervention has done is brought back the focus on South Asia as a region and what we can and should be doing. And I was just making a few points, and perhaps Ratnakar, you and others could think of this as a standalone session, because there are 4 or 5 elements which come out, and I'm actually combining everything that's been said. If we've got to ensure kind of sharing of the comparative advantages in renewable energies, as also look at the region as one, then there are 3 things that I just mentioned also because for the future. I think we definitely need to look at cross-border energy grids. and this is something, without having such energy grids, any kind of attempts at cooperation, any kinds of attempts at looking at the region at whole won't come about. We also need to start looking, and I really liked what Deepak ji had said, policies galore. Give Nobel Prizes to each one of us for our policies. But there has to be, more importantly, and that's when you talked about climate action, a supportive regulatory implementational environment. It's not just a supportive regulatory environment, but the second point I make is, for the region, a supportive regulatory implementation environment. And third, could be utopian, but still I will mention it. We probably need regional now financing mechanisms, and maybe in time to come we should stop calling them financing mechanism, but perhaps start calling them regional leveraging mechanism, because we need a bit of that public sector finance to leverage a far greater amount of private sector. And continue to focus on finance, and continue to have aspirations such as many of us went to COP29 with, bound to be a failure because you're looking at clumsy or uncomfortable solutions. So, Mozambique, thank you so much. I now have the pleasure of giving the floor to Saima. We have spoken a bit. Saima brings a wealth of experience about the renewable energy and the clean energy environment in Pakistan, what has been done, what more should be done. So perhaps you'll get a wonderful bird's eye view of the situation there, Saima.
Thank you, Shashir.
Absolutely. Oh, yes.
Thank you, Shashir, and I would like to thank the sortie and organizers for inviting me. Thank you for having me. I would like to start with the energy landscape of Pakistan because I believe that we share some of the common challenges in energy landscape. And if we are able to come up with the solutions that are applicable at domestic level, that can be replicated at regional level as well. As Shashir mentioned in the start, that there are 2 types of energy availability. One where the remote areas are so-called electrified, but there is problem in the transmission. They don't have energy availability throughout the day. And there is another aspect where they have the energy availability, but affordability is the issue. Energy tariffs are very high. And I must say that Pakistan is having the both situations. In Pakistan, still 40 million population is still don't have access to electricity. They are not connected to national grid, and this also presents not only challenge but a potential opportunity for renewable energy expansion. In Pakistan, unlike Nepal or Bhutan, who rely on hydropower, or India, who is expanding its wind and energy expansion, Pakistan has actually followed a fossil fuel driven energy expansion in the past decade. Our significant portion of over 50%, around 66%, still remains coal, fossil gas, and oil, with renewable energy accounting less than 5% of the total capacity. The remaining portion includes hydropower, nuclear, and biomass, which is neither fossil fuel nor classified as renewable energy in some contexts because of their ecological footprints. So, uh, we also have some progressive policies like Alternative and Renewable Energy Policy 2019, then Energy Efficiency and Conservation Policy 2023, where we have set very ambitious targets of renewable energy share of 60%, with 30% of hydro included. We also have IGSEP, a 10-year plan for clean energy transition. But now we are trying to push the increased share of hydropower to around 45%, with of course the VRE share is being decreased. In Pakistan, our energy grid expansion has been highly political motivated. One of our leading political party installed overcapacity energy grid due to the political and personal gains. But again, focusing on increased of fossil fuel based energy instead of sustainable sources. That overcapacity led to high capacity payments to independent power producers, again burdening the national budget and increasing electricity tariffs for the consumers. That actually, due to these high capacity payments, now wealthy households have started installing rooftop solar panels to decrease their dependency on national grid and bypassing electricity tariffs. Now, this situation is leaving the poor to bear the cost of the national grid cost of overcapacity. Again, it is further deepening the economic inequality. Now the question arises how Pakistan can incentivize the solar power adoption for the poor communities. Pakistan initially started few financial schemes for renewable energy, but again, those have been stopped due to lack of funds. And there are also, regulatory bottlenecks for the big investors to invest in the big solar and wind power plants, because a big example is a Muzaffargarh solar park of 600 megawatt capacity, but which was actually failed to attract a single investor despite multiple revisions and incentives, because the earlier approval processes and NOC process is very complicated. So there is no cohesive and conducive policy to attract the investors in Pakistan. Also, there is no such pathway defined. How can we integrate the renewable energy VRE in the overall our energy mix of Pakistan? What can we do for the just transition of energy in Pakistan when there is our transmission and distribution system is also very outdated, which is unable to sometimes support the fossil fuel based energy as well. A lot of fossil fuel based energy also gets wasted during the transmission and distribution process. Let alone the renewable energy. That is not able to support the variability of renewable energy sources. So I believe that for the just energy transition, we need to learn from the best practices from our neighboring countries as well. Like the India's rooftop solar panel project is one of them, where they came up with the small solar kits instead of the big rooftop solar panels. So instead of going for the rooftop solar panels, the big producers of solar panel equipment and big companies who produce these equipments, they can collaborate with the financial institutions like bank to provide small solar kits to rural households and the urban poor with easy repayment plans. The purpose is to decentralize renewable energy. Also, I think there is another issue of the livelihood of the workers who are working in fossil fuel industry. So there should be a ongoing job training for the workers in fossil fuel industry, so they could be supportive in the renewable energy sector as well. The investment is needed in the national grid, so it would be able to support the renewable energy as well. And if we look at the the potential of energy potential of Pakistan, I think as my fellow panelists said, that South Asia has lot of potential of renewable energy. This is true for Pakistan as well. Pakistan has solar potential of 2.9 million megawatt, with I think wind potential is around 100,000 megawatt. One of its example is Jhimpir wind corridor project installed in Sindh, which is again halted due to lack of funds. But this single project has the capacity of generating 50,000 megawatt, almost the double of the capacity of our peak demands of Pakistan. So if we are able to harness our potential, we can not only meet our domestic energy needs, but we can export the the surplus energy with the neighboring countries as well. But there are some issues at regional level. Among the South Asian countries, we have some historical tensions between South Asian countries, which actually hinder regional cooperation. There are some political sensitivities as well, and of course, there is need to invest in the transmission system, cross-border transmission system that limit trade. So there is investment on this side is also needed. But I must say that in this time, just clean energy transition is not just an environmental imperative for South Asia. Now it is an economic and social necessity, and achieving this transition does not only require financial resources, it also requires regulatory reforms and regional collaboration. Thank you very much.
Saima, thank you so much. Not only for bringing out the Pakistan's landscape, but I think for also touching upon what I would love to call, Deepak ji, with your permission, what I'd love to call the elephant in the room, the politics surrounding clean energy and green transformation. But to expand that, it's probably politics at three levels. We often think of politics often at one level, which is what you mentioned. There is national politics. You talked about certain vested interest in any country which want to promote fossil fuel, which don't really feel that they want to move away because it's a huge, big vested interest. So there are politics which will ensure that kind of fossil fuel dependency in the country doesn't go away. Then there's regional politics. Within this region itself, and you're absolutely right, we could cooperate far more. The few regional projects that do exist, invariably get questioned each time there is any change of political thinking. But the fact is that yes, there's regional politics. But again, something we don't talk often about is the international politics. Look at the power which the countries which are hugely dependent on fossil fuel exports, these countries, the power they exert in international bodies, the power they exert bilaterally with the big players. Will these countries let go of the huge amount of revenue that oil, for instance, or coal at times is generating for them? No. And we will probably be like ostriches if we do not look at this aspect. So thank you, Saima, for raising that. And I have now the privilege of giving the floor, as was said yesterday also. The last panelist, but the most important person, perhaps in some ways, because Ashish represents the power producers. And I think it's very essential to also hear from him, both in terms of the problems that they face, how they see growth coming up, and how this merger between development and climate change. Ashish.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm the odd one out here. I'm the private sector guy. So we are the one who are actually working on the ground. So, to start with Nepal, see, we are the world's most active hydropower country at the moment. We have more than 400 projects under construction, ranging from 1 megawatt to 100 megawatt. And the private sector is leading the way. So hydropower is a very, very risky business, long gestation, geological issue, environmental issue, financing. It's a very complex business. So Nepalese hydropower developers have ventured into this very risky territory. So, and let's see how it goes. So with this, really different work happening in Nepal. If you look at the numbers, our demand is very low, 1800 megawatt, only 280 kilowatt per capita, one of the lowest among our South Asian neighbors. So we are 97% access to electricity, but due to our socio-economic situation, we are not able to consume power for raising our own living standard. So there is access to electricity, there is a grid, like as our friend from Pakistan mentioned, 40 million people don't have a connection to the grid, but in Nepal, 97% has. But we are not able to consume because we don't really have that status, socio-economic status. So 1800 megawatt is our total demand, peak demand. We are generating 3600 in the rainy season. Why I say rainy season is our generation is 98% hydropower, and most of the projects are run of the river. So during rainy season, the water level in the river goes up, and we are able to generate 3600. But in the winters, say currently, when the rivers dry out, when there are no rains, we are only able to generate around 1400 megawatt. So now we have a very small denominator, I would say, only 1800 peak load, and 1800 peak load. However, our generation is 3600, and on top of that, our potential is 2 lakh megawatt, say 200 gigawatt. So look at this, 1800 is our demand, 3600 is what we are generating. In the winter, we are still at 1400, and our potential is 200 gigawatt. So what is happening is, unfortunately, or it's a paradox, that we are importing from India currently in the winters, and we are exporting 1000 megawatt in the rainy season. This will go on for next 2-3 years till our hydro capacity goes up, and we are able to have full generation for the winter demand. But in rainy season, again, this run-of-the-river project, we continue to increase our export to India. So I would term it as the fortune of Nepal's hydropower development is dependent on primarily India and maybe to some extent Bangladesh if power flows there. So we are sitting on a big potential in Nepal, and then if we increase it, if we really harness it, then we have to depend on South Asian neighbors. So and when I look at other countries, Bhutan also has a similar situation, that they also have 30,000 megawatt approx hydro potential. So if they have to really harness this resource, they have to export. And then India and Bangladesh have a high fossil fuel dependency. India is 50%, Bangladesh, as mentioned now, 95%. And what we hear, Pakistan is also on fossil fuels to a large extent. So if we regionally integrate, each one will benefit with each other. It will accelerate the green energy transition in the region. But we all have to get together. We all have different set of resources. We are rich in different things. So if we integrate, if we combine, if we coordinate, we all will reap the benefits. But now comes here the shadow of geopolitics, India-Nepal relation, Nepal-China relation, India-China relation, India-Pakistan relation, all this, So in Nepal, we have been, I would say, overshadowed these days as a developer on the geopolitics. If we have to buy equipment, it's a hard reality. We have to think the country of origin of that equipment is from where. Because the export of power is denied, if the equipment or the contractor or the money, what is the color of that money, So if there is a touch from certain country, it's contaminated, right? So that shadow is there. Now for Nepal, now there is a big problem that if we have to be rich, if we have to get that prosperity from hydropower, where should we align our thoughts? Shall we align with India, more, because that is very near and that is the real market, that is the nucleus of South Asian energy market. To send to Bangladesh also, it is linked to India. So now here comes our policy makers. Unfortunately in Nepal, I will be hard because I am the one working on the ground, we don't have a policy here in Nepal. I would say similar to Pakistan, what our friend mentioned, that policy is not so strong. So here we have a lot of policy instability. We have to run around 14 ministries, 36 departments, more than 40 acts to, construct a hydropower project. And policy consistency is not there. With political instability, the seat of power changing, hydropower development, how we should do, whether we should do run of the river, whether we should have a consensus with India, whether we should get into energy security with more solar wind. So we don't have a policy. We have the rivers with high hydropower potential. So we as developers go around, find a stretch of river, invest the money somehow, and then feel that, okay, Nepal Electricity Authority will pay us. So we are working in a policy vacuum, or let's say policy lack of clarity. So Nepal, I would say by default, is a green energy. We are 98% hydro. So I think it is by default because we have so much hydro, right? So if we had coal, probably we could have gone into coal. So by default, we are 98% hydro. And we are in that glory that, okay, we have this much hydro and we'll be able to export. When we export, we don't have a consensus, we don't have a policy. We signed a 10,000 megawatt agreement with India long term, but the nuts and bolts of it is not in place. There are no real efforts on the ground to make it happen. We are so confused in geopolitics, we are so confused, so lost how it will happen. And now coming to the Bangladesh angle of it, so 40 megawatt was exported, but there is a constraint on the transmission between India, Bangladesh. So I think this 40 megawatt number is a very welcome thing, but it will take some time. We signed 9,000 megawatt MOU with Bangladesh 7 years back, but things move so slow in power sector. So what is required basically is, what is required is a very strong policy in Nepal. That how much we want to develop. We want to develop hydro, then ROR, PROR or storage. We want to develop solar, battery storage. We do have wind also, we have solar also, good potential. What we have to do, and then make up an atmosphere within Nepal for developers like us to really take up large projects. And then political consensus. I mean, this word is very charming, consensus. There are so many connotations to it. I don't know how our honorable former minister is also seen how this politics moves. So that consensus would be required among all the neighbors. And finally, coming to the climate resilient part of it. We are talking, I was very upset to hear that one comment that hydro is not renewable because it has its own ecological footprints. That makes the whole dialogue in a different direction in Nepal, because only hydro and we are talking renewable. So we all have to again start rethinking about it. So who will foot the bill of this? As Dr. Gewali mentioned about, who will clean up bill? The laundry bill will be whose? So in Nepal, I would recall the UN Secretary General. He visited Nepal early this year. He said at the UN General Assembly that Antarctica and the Everest region in Nepal is the most climate vulnerable in the world. We were zapped to hear that because when he came here, he went to the base camp area, Everest base camp. So he can see with his eyes that, the glaciers are receding, the water levels have gone down. You hardly see snow even during winters in the higher reaches. So now what is happening in our hydro is that we are facing penalties. In April, what was my water level, say 100 meter cube per second, it's gone down to 80. In June, it was 100, it's gone up to 120. So we are paying penalty for last 2 to 3 years. We are paying penalty to the off-taker for lower generation. So climate change impact in hydro in Nepal is very much evident. It is actually putting up a big problem. And every floods, every monsoon season, we have more than 24 projects washed out, hydros. This year the tally was 27. Last year it was 23. So I build a hydro and then I don't know, sleepless night when it rains, that when my project will be washed out, because I have constructed it on the river. So now to make it a climate resilient renewable energy development, where is the money? Unfortunately, in Nepal, foreign investment has not come in the hydro sector. It is not there. I recall what Mr. Kharel mentioned in the morning session, that hydropower is the jewel in Nepal's or South Asian crown or whatever. But we are facing, there is no money coming in. There is hardly any foreign investment in hydro because of lack of conducive environment, doing business, hedging policy is not clear. Our country rating is just come in, and there are so many, we can talk for hours on that. So now, if we really build climate resilient hydros or climate resilient energy sector here in Nepal, the tariff has to be commensurate. NEA is NEA is squeezing our neck, not paying us, paying low tariff. So how do we build project and earn a climate resilient project? So, and green financing has not come. This word green is Greek for us, green money has not come in Nepal. We borrow from normal commercial bank at arm's length rate. So that COP26, COP28, 29, all this money, that impact has not come here in Nepal. So the money is required. And we have a target of 28,500 megawatt by 2035. In 11 years, the government of Nepal wants to construct 25,000 megawatt hydro, which requires $40 billion, something equivalent to our GDP. And the money is not there in our system. All we borrow from local banks, foreign money is not coming, international funds are not coming, green fund, climate fund, this, that is not coming in. So with all this confusion, and this, still we are most, I would say, active country in hydropower. The numbers is increasing, 3,000 megawatt under construction, 4,000 megawatt PPA signed, and things are moving, but a lot of challenges, lot of opportunities we see in making South Asia clean, green, and developed. So that's how I would like to connect Nepal with the green transition in the South Asia. Thank you.
Ashish, thank you so much. Thank you for, actually sharing the ground experience of a country really rich in hydro potential, but possibly where lots more could be done. But that's the story of all our countries where, truthfully, lots more could be done, but at least it's being done. We have time, and we still have a few of our people, audience still here. So, no, it's fair enough. But so don't necessarily, I'm not opening the floor for a question. You may or may not have a question, you're very welcome. But anything you want to share in terms of your own experience, or anything that listening to the people on the panel might, any thoughts that might have been evoked on any aspect, or a thought on any aspect which may not even have been touched. So just help us remain in the room for 15 more minutes.
Energy sector has already become, seems like it's become a means of geopolitics rather than which it should be a public service and something. So there is Rampal to satisfy a country, there is Paira to satisfy another, there is Rupur to satisfy for another country. So when we talk about the environment, when we talk about the reduction of dependency in the fossil fuel, we were against Rampal. There were huge protests against Rampal. Still, it's over there. So in this scenario, that seems like the energy sector moving from fossil fuel to renewable energy, it's more a political will than I think investment is, yes, it's an issue, but political will is the major issue for removing from the fossil fuel. In Bangladesh, we have double the capacity than our needs. Still, we cannot meet the security of our electricity, and it's completely because of the dependency on the fossil fuel. And if we talk about this South Asian region, there are no such country who is actually the producer of fossil fuel in an extent to exporting other countries. So there is about 2/3 of fossil fuel imported in this region. So we are mainly dependent on the fossil fuel from other region. And if we talk about getting out of this dependency from fossil fuel, as Biraj mentioned, that we have enough resource to meet our demand in this region by renewable energy. So if we collaborate in this region to get out of this fossil fuel region, it's completely depending on our political will for both individual countries and along with the regional cooperation, I guess. And accordingly, as I was working with the renewable, there is something that we researched on. Since Bangladesh is a land-scarce country, and there is always saying that renewable energy is not for Bangladesh, more like solar energy is not for Bangladesh because we don't have enough land. So finally, we came out with this research that we have more than enough government land which has not been allocated to anything, not even forest or anything, more than enough government land to produce 10 times than our demand from solar. So if we think about this, there is possibilities, there is something that is pushing backwards from going towards renewable energy. So all of these things that there are some companies, there are some investors in Bangladesh who are producing renewable energies from solar, and they are willing to expand it because it's quite beneficial, quite profitable. So if we think about this, that if renewable energy from solar is quite profitable in our country, they are willing to invest more, they are willing to expand their capacity. So it is completely fine with financing, and maybe it's not in a huge investment, but we think that it is very much potential for our expansion in the renewable energies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. Good morning. I think good afternoon all. This is Subha Lakshmi Shrestha. I'm from organization called Alternative Energy Promotion Center, which is under the Ministry of Energy, and we are mandated body for renewable energy and energy efficiency for the Nepal. I'm there as in the capacity of Deputy Director. So thank you so much for the organizer for inviting me for this session, especially for this session. And as we all know that energy is a lifeline for development, and we have the session for tapping clean energy for the development today here. And as we discussed here, and like South Asia is having maldevelopment, right? And because maybe this is one of the characteristics of developing region as well. And COPE, which is something only in talk and not in action, which South Asia could feel really, because we are the most vulnerable ones, and this vulnerability is getting worse and worse year by year. And in the morning session and here also we knew that, and we feel also that policies really do not talk with each other, and which also happens particularly in Nepal as well. We have many plans like periodic plans, and but there is a problem in leveraging finance optimally for to realize the development in that. So I would like to know from the panel if there could be the possibility, like what could be the 1 or 2 areas where we should really look after to realize good development via tapping clean energy. And as we all know that Nepal being in the Hindu Kush region, maybe we could also serve as a battery bank for the South Asia. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sir.
I don't need a microphone. I think the room. I'm loud enough, and yeah, the room is very small. So just one question that I wanted to ask, building on Ashish's remark, and then Shishir, you also mentioned about regional geopolitics. So given the recent talk between India and China on the political front, I think this is really a good news for us. Will there be any change in approach towards the use of input of the color of money from one country to another in order to be able to trade power with with one country or the other. That's one aspect that I want to discuss. I want to get some response on. The other thing is that we are discussing so much about climate finance also, the green finance. And there is a separate session that is devoted to green finance tomorrow, which I'll be present there. I'll be moderating that session, and we can have discussion on finance bit also there.
Thank you, Ratnakar. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Namaste. I'm Min Vikram Malla from Practical Action. Practical Action is INGO registered in UK. And we have been active in Nepal since 1979. Till 2010, we were focused on microhydro production. After that, we are focused on use of energy. More, we thought that now there is a need to focus on promoting use, the demand. Currently, we are promoting electric cooking, productive use of energy, energy efficiency, kind of things. As Ashish ji mentioned, in Nepal, per capita energy consumption is very low. And also another thing, we are going to have surplus electricity. So now I think we need to focus on demand as well, demand, promoting demand, not in only in Nepal, in South Asia also. Here, I think we need to talk, and also at the policy level, intervention level, equally important is to have demand of clean energy and energy efficiency also. Thank you.
Perfect. Would the back table like to? Yes, please. I was hoping you would raise your hand. Thank you. There's so much to learn from the work you do.
Yep, I think I got it. Thanks a lot. And thanks for this exciting panel. It's so interesting to hear not only regional but individual country perspectives. I think I was deeply touched when I was listening to Deepak ji, because how strongly his intervention corresponded with the evidence that we are finding when working on not only climate change mitigation but also on adaptation. A lot of countries are putting those things separately. There is, the mitigation bucket and mitigation efforts, and adaptation bucket and adaptation efforts. And the only element that actually combines both of them is the energy generation. And when for a lot of developed countries, the renewable energy comes as part of a mitigation efforts, for a lot of developing countries, making sure that they have access to renewable energy is part of their adaptation, part of their energy security efforts. And this is shocking how we're talking about the same thing, but with completely different vocabularies. I think Deepak ji also mentioned the importance of access to water, and that's really the question that is, I think, really underestimated in the multilateral trade conversations that we're having about the importance of clean energy and how that is so closely linked to food security as well. We tend to think about those things in silos. I don't think that this is a way that we can be any longer thinking about that. I think one of the things that we also sometimes lean towards the thinking is that the traditional power sources somehow come free of charge. And I think one of the speakers also already hinted upon the fact that it's not really the case, right? Those industries also have very strong lobbies, and they have been promoted and supported by our governments for a long time because that was seen as the only way to make sure that both industries, businesses, and our populations have access to energy as they should. now the question is how can we make sure to properly align that state support and make sure that having access to clean electricity becomes as much of a priority as it used to be when talking about access to any type of electricity, and that is not cheap. I think this is what I think, and I heard about Ashish talking about. That's definitely the renewable energy is moody. You just talked about that so well, and whereas the hydropower might be seasonal, the solar and wind might change several times a day, and that moodiness needs to be adequately reflected in the grids, in the connectors, in transformer stations, and that's really a lot of investment coming for each of our governments, whatever path they are taking. Being able to integrate that amount of renewables will demand a lot of regional interconnectors, and that will demand regional strategy, and I'm really a bit heartbroken to hear how often the politics actually get in the way of those Nobel Prize worthy policies. Thank you.
Sure, and maybe we'll keep that as the final comment, and then perhaps go back to the panelists in the reverse order.
Thank you. I'm Shafqat Munir from Pakistan. I think tapping clean energy for development for South Asia, for Pakistan, we have a kind of different sort of resources we are tapping for it. And it is difficult and it has an additional cost. But in Pakistan's case, I would like to mention two things. Maybe Simon would have mentioned a couple of things earlier. One is that Pakistan has backtracked from the NDCs. Earlier in the earlier NDCs, we have said that we will be fully backing the phase out of coal. But when we came back, we have assessed that this is the only cheapest energy source remaining in Pakistan of $24 billion worth. Though its quality is compromised, but with mix of it, we can run it. So the government decided that we will say not phase out, but phase down. One thing is here. Secondly, the rooftop solar panel, that have largely increased in Pakistan now. And in fact, in the energy mix, they have a huge share at the moment. It is not because that people have love for the green energy. It is because of the cost of energy they were paying from the resources, energy resources in Pakistan. So this kind of dichotomy we face here when we search or tap for clean energy sources. So I think that is a point which I want to raise. Thank you.
Shaukat, thank you so much. Let me get back to the panel. I mean, other than one question specifically directed, just feel free to comment on any aspect, and the moderator's job is to pick up any unanswered question at the end. So, Ashish, we could start with you.
Yeah, so let me address some comments from the floor, which I think could relate to me. One was Madam from Alternative Energy Promotion Center. So, ma'am, you asked that what could be done, for Nepal being the battery of the Hindu Kush, let's say this region. Currently, I would say that India is the battery for Nepal, In the winter season, we are importing from India, and when we have surplus, we are exporting to India. So maybe in next 3 years or so, when we add up our capacity, we will be in reverse. We could be the battery for South Asia, India and Bangladesh to be particular. So I think we have some journey to make. Another thing which I wanted to comment was, the rooftop thing which has come up. It is under your jurisdiction as in AEPC, and the two projects done by AEPC, the DKTI and the NERP, right, the UK Aid and the German Climate Fund, that rooftop has done wonders, in Nepal. Like in Nepal, rooftop penetration is very, very low. But now we are picking up because of two funds available in Nepal. So that has increased the rooftop penetration, and that is the cheapest source of energy because you don't need the infrastructure like transmission distribution, you don't need land, you don't need transformers. So I think AEPC, if you could further promote, probably Nepal could get a new dimension to its energy generation. on Ratnakarji's India, Nepal, India, China. So I'm not a politician. I'm a businessman. I don't have any alliance to any political party, but so I'm free to comment, right? So without any interpretation by anyone. So, India, Nepal, India, China relation improving, what we see in the business could really reduce the shadow of geopolitics, definitely. However, just on a passing note, I would say that Nepal signed the BRI framework. We read in the newspaper, media and all. So probably that could give another connotation to the relations, right? I don't know how India would react to that or would have reacted, These are all diplomatic or inside stories. So it continues to be extremely sensitive, extremely, complex issue, which affects Nepal's power sector, because power is a strategic commodity for India. It is. On the, on the sir's comment on the demand side, yes, Nepal, to increase the demand in Nepal with one of the lowest per capita consumption. One is cooking. Cooking, 2/3 of Nepalese cooking is done on fuel wood. In spite of having 97% access to power, fuel wood. And LPG is what, say, in my home, morning breakfast was on LPG, right? So that needs to be, the LPG and the fuel wood has to be replaced with our hydropower or our clean energy. For that, government has to come with some revolution, some subsidy or this electric stove has to enter Nepalese household. Second is EV. So now 98% cars sold in Nepal is now EV, I also came up in an EV this morning, right? So EV is coming in Nepal. That will increase the demand. And third is the industry. The industry, there are transmission problems. There are some supply problems. So if industry is provided right electricity at the right time, then, I think industrial demand will also increase. So there is three-pronged revolution required to increase demand in Nepal: cooking, industry, and on the transport sector. Probably that could really help. And then finally, to make to further, comment on the overall green energy transition. So from a Nepalese perspective, I think we have committed to 2045 as our net zero, much ahead of what India or China or other countries are. So we have an ambitious target to make, and our renewable energy resources, particularly hydropower, followed by solar. We have some good wind corridors also, so probably we could be much ahead of our neighbors in achieving that target, and also to provide very reliable 24/7 firm hydropower to our fossil fuel hungry giant neighbors, right? Particularly India and then probably Bangladesh also. So I think Nepal, if we get some policy things correct, if we really get some policy corrections, policy interventions, and provide policy stability, a lot could be further achieved in Nepal. And it gives me a lot of happiness to see that we fare better than many of the others. It's not a competition, but it's just a feeling of working here in the country. So we are in a good position. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ashish. Look, I think he's answered most of the questions, but still, feel free to come in any aspect that you feel you may not have touched upon in your intervention. Saima.
Thank you. A lot has been said. I just want to sum up saying that as Pakistan imports 70% of its fossil fuel requirements, so for the transition of clean energy, this should not be the case because it makes it vulnerable. It makes Pakistan vulnerable for the global price fluctuations and the supply chain disruptions. So when we are planning to transit to clean energy, this should not be the case that we keep on importing the renewable energy equipment from the foreign. We should promote the local market for the renewable energy equipment. That will not only decrease our dependency on export, it will also decrease the final price for the customer and increase the employment opportunities. I also would like to add that, as I said earlier, that there have been historical tensions between South Asian countries. They are still there, and I think they are the main cause. If we talk about these issues or not, they have been the main cause that hinder the regional collaboration. So I think we should take climate crisis as an opportunity to put behind all these issues, and to come beyond that, and we have to do it. This is not an option. We are bound to do it. This is the only option. We should promote the local market for the renewable energy equipment. Here, I think we can not only be able to meet the domestic energy needs, but we can always, export the surplus equipment with the neighboring countries, be it the solar or wind or the electric vehicles. We should promote the local industry. Thank you.
Thank you. In fact, you know that Bangladesh has recently experienced a political transition, and that transition also has a strong meaning for energy transition as well. And Professor Yunus, since past, has promoting 3-0, and one of the zero is zero carbon emission. So after taking power, he is trying to actually promote the renewable energy in terms of the operational decisions as well as in the policy-related areas. And this government has already taken decision to revise the earlier policies to make them more renewable energy friendly. And to facilitate and promote the renewable energy in the coming decades. At the same time, in the earlier regime, the public contracts, those happened, were somewhat not competitive, faulty, and were highly costly. And the current fiscal burden the government currently experiencing is largely because of the energy-related huge debt burden the country currently experiencing. So since it is being already revealed that renewable energy related power generation is cheaper and sustainable, so it is more and more there is an approach towards investment, more investment in the renewable energy in the coming days. So thereby the government has repealed the earlier Quick Enhancement Act, Special Act, and has gone for the public procurement rules on a competitive basis to set prices and give contracts to the most competitive bidders. So we hope that more and more local and foreign investors will show their interest to invest in the renewable energy sector in Bangladesh. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Climate change is happening, and it's happening in more complex and more rapid way than we are imagining and discussing and being serious about it. So this has actually brought on international force measures. For example, Europe has already introduced what we call as this carbon border adjustment mechanisms, which is impacting all the regions. United Kingdom has already come out of the coal with the coal exit program that is in place by 31st October. So many things are happening at the international level, which is putting lots of pressure and motivations at the regional level as well. So when we talk about the business as usual scenario, clean energy, like today's topic, how to tap the clean energy and use the clean energy. Clean energy is not born out of business as usual scenario. It is coming out from business unusual scenario, which is induced by this climate change. So the solutions to the problems that we are discussing should be out of the box. It will never come through the same mindset, through the same political strategies, with the same kind of business scenarios that we have induced or we have formed on the fossil fuel scenarios. So I think that is the things, and things have started to change. So India is the largest exporter of the steel to the European Union, and now since European Union will be banning the import of steel that touches coal from 2028, India has to think something else out of the box. Within 2 months of time, they have decided to start a project, 20,000 crore project in Gujarat, powered by solar, to produce green steel and reduce by hydrogen. That's things. So that is the things that is driving us. As I said, the renewable energy has the problems of quality, reliability, and flexibility. So how to add that quality, reliability, and flexibility in renewables and to replace the fossils, the largest fossils being consumed in steel industries. And for Nepal, it's the second largest import that's happening. 112 billion rupees were spent every year to import the steels. And we have enough iron steel reserves, iron mines in the country to feed our 100 years of demand. So how to do that? Then all the power will be utilized. So these are the questions that needs out of the box solutions. And I think the regional collaborations is extremely needed. This climate change and the climate crisis is forcing us to forget the past, to see the future, like earthquakes happened and all the neighbors forgot about their small issues and helped each other to come out of the shocks. This climate change is forcing us. So I think the most important thing is to have a regional strategy, regional roadmap, regional action plans, and regional outcomes and regional impact that will save us together, that will help us together to come out of this climate change and to help us to implement this clean energy. As I said, yes, our region have sufficient renewable energy to feed our economy, to run our industries, to meet our demands. But what we don't have is the common way of thinking to help each other, to come out of the shocks that we built in last 200 years. Because the future is for next 1,000 years. We have to live together and we have to thrive together. Otherwise, we need to accept we will be washed out together with this climate change. Thank you so much.
Biraji, thank you so much, and really pleasure of concluding the session goes to Deepakji.
Okay, thank you. I'll start with the comments and questions I've taken down. Raisul from Bella, long ago when Rizwana was still leading Bella there, I was there. And I said something that resounds with what you said, and I'll repeat it here, I mean, you basically talked about political will and it not doing what should be done. My argument is, political will is always there, you see. Without political will, the politicians wouldn't be where they are. Okay? The only trouble is that will is not directed to where you and I want it. It's there. And as I mentioned, that 2018 study of ours on climate action in Nepal, yeah, the policies are all wonderful, but the political will is to get more, Pajero cars on the road and no public transport and so on and so forth. Okay? So the political will is there, but it's in the wrong place. Now, the only way a political will can be brought about or changed or brought to the way you and I want it is actually to have, activism. And that is really missing all over the world right now. Like I said, in the 21st century, it's bad, but specifically in Nepal. Because most of our civil society leaders have just gone and joined the political parties and, there's no civic activism, okay? That's the first one. So, Lakshmiji, now, you said one or two areas. Let me tell you one thing, I think there was some time back this whole thing about induction cookers and sort of, giving them out for free. And I did some study on this, went out and looked at villages and places where they're distributed. And what I found interesting was that, induction cookers that were distributed free, if it is in the mountains of Nepal, they were quickly packed up, put under the bed, and given away as dowry to their daughter when they got married. Nobody used it. Okay. In the Tarai, I found out, it quickly found within 15 days to a market in Muzaffarpur. Okay. Now, why were people not using it? Because, and this comes to the crux, we have 97% electrification in Nepal. So practically every Nepali has access to electricity. The quality is so bad, and I'm in the middle of a study and survey right now on this. The horror stories I'm hearing, our survey showed that, I'm talking to Morang Chamber of Industries, I'm talking to Pokhara, I've just come back from there, I'm going to Nepalganj day after tomorrow. Now, what is fascinating is that the quality of electricity is very poor because the expansion to 97% that has happened in the last 20 years is the distribution is so poor. Industries find out that Nepalganj is the worst, 35 times outages in a week. And once it goes out, you melted plastic to make bottles or something and the plastic is finished. You put, food there to make noodles and then, the electricity goes out, that whole batch of ingredients has to be thrown away, And the average loss, our survey will be putting out by about January or February. The report will be out on our website. But it shows that an average industry loss because of poor quality of electricity is about 12%. Overall loss. That's huge. That's generally the profit margin of good industries. Right? Now, so the electric cooker, the reason they are not using it, because they say the answer they gave in Nepali was, "Kacho bhat khana khana wakavo." We're tired of eating uncooked rice. You put on electric induction on the induction cooker, the light goes out. Now, what do? Eat uncooked rice. There's no other way. Okay, so that is the reason they are putting it under their bed and giving it to their daughters on marriage and dowry and not using it themselves. My answer to your question would be improve the distribution quality, and that can only be done not by a monopoly national utility like NEA, it has to be done by municipalities. So unless distribution of water and electricity is handed over to municipalities, it's not going to solve our problem. The other point is, on your question is, your real answer is, well, I've said before, pump storage hydro with solar. That would really change the complete development dynamics of energy in Nepal. On Ratnagarji, you asked a very interesting question. What about the China-India thaw? I really hope that thaw happens. Unfortunately, that thaw is not expressing itself in Nepal. And the reason is very simple. I have argued with my friends. If India really needed electricity, even if Martians produce that electricity, what's the problem in taking it? There's really no problem. But here to say that, because Chinese dynamite was used in this construction, there is a Chinese whatever here, we're not going to take it. I've asked my Indian academic friends, I said, please tell me what Schrodinger's cat stuff you have discovered that allows you to distinguish between a pure Hindutva electron versus a Mleksha Chinese electron. This is ridiculous, okay? And my request to Indian friends is this, that forget the government level, this is having a very bad impact at the public, mass public level in Nepal. And this is something that's, industries and others we need to work on, Whoever in the South Bloc or whoever, figured out that you can pressure Nepal by doing this kind of stuff is backfiring. Even as for India, China is one of the biggest trading partners. So where is, does it not strike the policymaker in India that we're doing something that's so contradictory that even a child would understand this, So this is where I think there's a really need to get government of India to move away from seeing water and energy as strategic commodities. I have argued with IPAN, and they don't like me for this reason, but I've said, you guys talk about, this market in India for electricity. No, there is no market for electricity in India. There's huge demand for electricity in India, but to equate market with demand is completely wrong. It's a strategic commodity in India, which means it's highly regulated and it's determined by a couple of bureaucrats saying we'll only take 20 megawatts from this project and 5 megawatts from that project. This is not a market. So in India, there is huge demand, but there is no market. So something must be done to free this both water and energy. It will never be completely a private good. It will have to remain a public good. But what extent can we introduce private nature of management to increase the efficiency? Because we are most inefficient in both our energy and water consumption. So that's the real issue. Now, you talked about climate finance. My request to you is this. Can you go one step back? Even development finance is dead. Forget climate finance. That's going to come much later. DFID is closed. USAID is on its deathbed, and entire development finance is really, really on a deathbed right now. I shudder to think what Trump is going to do. So with Germany deindustrializing and all that, it's going to cause a huge problem. So again, this whole idea of rethinking development is so critical. We have to come back to it. Okay, Malaji, I can only answer your question by saying that we're in the middle of a survey. Both on household we have finished nationwide first time, energy, electricity included. You can get it from our website. We're in the middle of an industry survey, and we're next going to be doing the transport, energy and transport survey. Okay, you're really right. That market pressure because electricity charging is so much cheaper than petroleum, it's about 2 to 3 times cheaper. It's amazing on a per kilometer basis. Well, I found 2 to 3 times overall, but you say 10 times. Huh? But no, that depends on how many miles and passenger miles you're carrying. Okay. The pressure, market pressure is so much that you go down that BP highway and, there are charging stations coming up like mushrooms, So many, so if Nepal can make a major transition in transport to electric transport, I mean, your problem of excess electricity will have been solved, especially if you can give practically free electricity between 11 at night to 5 in the morning, which is when the charging has to be done. Okay. Now, what our survey has shown, the other thing it has shown is that because of political and social reasons, when we ask this question to households and now also to industries, amazing answer we are getting is, if we had more reliable and cheap electricity, what would you invest in? Stunning answer, 49% of the industry and people ended up saying that I will not invest in anything. Now, this is a contradiction. Why? You're finding out because of the social and political constraints. I may be impolite enough to say it's basically rent seeking that's going on. And that's the main reason. I'll close with Eva. I think you asked some very interesting question that ties up with what Shishir has said. This need to go back to nexus thinking. There are 2 fundamental areas where this nexus thinking will have to apply. One is on transport of water, food, and energy, all 3. And the second is on storage of water, food, energy. And in all of this, this footprint and localization is going to be very important. How do you get more localization? I'm stunned to find out that potatoes grown by a farmer in the district of Gorkha, 1 hour walking on his back with his potatoes that he carries to the bazaar, he cannot sell his potatoes. Why? Because he cannot compete with potatoes burning 2,000 kilometers of fossil fuel from Punjab. Now, this is something very serious. Now, you mentioned about this political thing behind, this energy issue. We use the term technological lockedness. Once you are into one kind of a technology, fossil fuel technology or another one, you are into a situation of lockedness from which it's very difficult to get out without extremely serious political will, if you will, that sees that longer vision and comes out of it like Iceland did and moved out completely from fossil fuel. I'll end with this. Thank you.
Deepakji, thank you so much. Look, I know we're running out of time, and that is why I had to interrupt you, but just 3. I'll use my moderator's whatever power just to say 3 things, just 3 things. One, the huge value of this session. If personally to me, then I'm certain to you, and I'm so glad it's being taped. I think there's a wealth of information. And usually moderators are just supposed to watch the clock and then give it. But if you simply go by the amount of notes I've taken, that's my personal value, sir. So thank you to a lot of the very, very amazing inputs. And that's only 1 page I'm showing. I've lost more pages. Second point, really, is, for 25 years, I worked in the World Trade Organization and thought it was a very, very diverse area, global trade. You had anti-dumping, you had subsidies, you had various things. Yes. Just by this session alone, I think the diversity of issues in climate change and the nuances within each issue are far, far more than what exists in global trade, sir. Third, and that I want to actually end with that, perhaps it's my way of saying thank you to Swati to inviting me. I was having a conversation outside, and I don't know whether Ratnakar's aware or not, he probably should be, that there are a number of your fans outside who are in the journalist trade, and I met a few of them, and who seem to say that they are writing and doing things a lot because of whatever you must have, trained them or parted. As I was, listening to the session, and normally moderators either say, look, too difficult to sum up, or they highlight a few points. What I've done is, I've assumed that 5 of your disciples were sitting here, 5 journalists. I'm going to give you 5 headlines that I think this session has given me. First, and these are more titles of papers that, well, someone could write, I would happily do 2 of them. First, uncomfortable questions don't have neat solutions. 2, the geopolitics of energy cooperation in South Asia. 3, water, the dark side of climate transformation, something we're not talking about. 4, looking beyond the politics of climate data. And 5th, perhaps really important, and so much that's been said, Global South must now walk the climate talk. So with that, gentlemen and ladies, thank you so much. Warm round of applause there.
You summed up quite well.